Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Today I have a colleague, Jackie Ferguson. Jackie and I both belongs to the forum's executive councils, and we were able, and I should say I was privileged to have her as part of a DEI meeting that we had not too long ago, which was really, really well received. So I asked Jackie to come in so we can chat a little bit further about some of the concerns that we're seeing around what she does in her business, the diversity movement around DEI. So Jackie, thanks so much for coming on today and spending some time with us.
Roxanne, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about kind of, diversity is, this sounds harsh, but it's the topic. It's the hot topic.
It is.
Even though it shouldn't be a hot topic, but it's always so necessary. And obviously we know with the change in times what a need that has been. But I want to jump right in and not get into, we know with George Floyd that, obviously this is something that needed to be highlighted, but it took such adversity for that to happen. But yes. I was just reading some research around McKinsey and Deloitte, and what they're saying is, the reality is everybody knows that this is necessary. There's been a lot of things put out to the marketplace about things that should be done. And then there's the reality of what's happening. So I'd like to kind of just dive in and talk a little bit about what you're seeing in reference to what's happening in the marketplace around diversity.
Sure. Well, Roxanne, I think that, after the murder of George Floyd and others, and the spotlight on racial injustice was placed on our society, I think that organizations felt that that push from their employees and from their consumers and clients to really step into a realm that was new, right? Which is speaking about current events and things that are happening in society and providing them the support they needed. And so a lot of companies made commitments to DEI, certainly put out those diversity statements, and then got into the work and realized, it's hard, right? As you think about shifting your culture, especially for companies that have been around for a while. And as you think about change leadership, right? We think about change management, but you can't manage change in people, but you can lead a change. And that's hard as well. And so, and then in addition to that, on top of that, you've got the, dealing with people's long-held beliefs a lot of times and long-held behaviors, which now you're encouraging this shift. And all of that is hard. And I think that a lot of companies didn't understand or realize or have the support that they needed to make these changes. And so, understanding how to implement, roll out, and then continue to make progress in your DEI initiatives requires some time and expertise. And so I think that a lot of companies didn't realize that. And then also, you don't see those changes right away, Roxanne. It takes time. Studies show that it's about 3 years to see real progress in your DEI initiatives. Now, you can see progress up through those 3 years, but to really feel that shift takes about 3 years. So, we're 2 years in now. So for organizations that really made that commitment and have been putting in the effort for education and change and integrating it throughout their organization, they should start seeing those real changes now.
So tell me, like, if it's almost like steps or levels, right? The oh my goodness, that we're in crises, to all right, let's have a DEI support person, to maybe a DEI officer,
Sure.
to now how does this kind of fit into our overall strategic plan? So what might people experience? Let's say people went into crises, which I think everybody did, with George Floyd. What would be the difference that, if let's say I'm a novice, I have no idea, I'm thinking about starting to join a company, and I want to make the best decision about where my strengths and my leverage and what I value being diversity and inclusion. And I'm trying to decide which company to go with. So if I'm meeting the person at the initial, and I'm meeting the person in the middle, and I'm meeting the person that's really kind of at the last quarter mile, let's say, what should I be kind of looking for at these different stages?
Yeah, the most important thing to get started is to make sure that you've got the buy-in from your C-suite and understand the benefits to DEI, successful DEI, to your organization. So if you think about C-suite, of course, everyone thinks about the CEO, right? So there are studies that show, Roxanne, the difference in profitability, which matters to your CEO, right? Profitability is important. Right there around happy employees that feel valued and feel a sense of belonging at the organization. If you think about your CFO, they do a lot around compliance and risk, right? And if you've got a strong DEI program, you're avoiding some of these harassment claims and discrimination claims. When you're thinking about marketing, so your CMO, you're going to think about your brand reputation, expanding your market reach to include more diverse people, which is how our society is trending, right? We're more diverse than we ever have been before. And, in the next, I would say 5 to 7 years, the shift will change to where culturally diverse people will be more than non-culturally diverse people. And so how are you managing that from a marketing standpoint, and making sure that you're messaging those folks that have different habits, right? Even Gen Z coming into the workplace, you've got to think about them from a employee perspective and also from a market reach perspective. And they want to know that the organizations that they work for and support have those same value alignments that they do, because that's extremely important to them. So as you go through your C-suite, you need to know what message resonates with each of those folks. And then from there, you want to make sure that your DEI strategy is integrated within your organization, your full organization. And Roxanne, the way to do that is to understand your analytics for DEI. So understanding how to measure the sentiment going into your DEI program of your employees. People that are very excited about it, and certainly after all that occurred in the summer of 2020. A lot of organizations that were excited about, implementing these programs thought that their full, employee base was also as excited as they were. And a lot of them found out that was not the case. So understanding what that really looks like, how to communicate is important. And then understand what you're measuring, what you should be measuring, so that you can create a good baseline for where you're really starting, right? A lot of times executives think they understand the sentiment of their employees, right? But sometimes that can be off. And so you want to understand what you've really got, where you're really starting, and then create your plan based on where your organization is. And there is not a one size fits all plan. Each organization is different. The way they communicate is different. The way their culture is built is different. And so it's a one company at a time, one step at a time situation.
I'm curious, right? And when you said, of course, the business, the business strategy, if you're speaking to marketing, speaking the terms, if you're talking to finance, speaking numbers, the CEO, you give a synthesis of every kind of, lines that you need him or her to get.
Absolutely.
What I'm curious about, though, is when you have a diverse C-suite versus maybe a more homogeneous C-suite. How is that? Because I would find that quite fascinating. Because, like, for instance, like, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, so I grew up diverse, right? Like, I grew up with every color of the rainbow. Like, one friend was Chinese, the other was European. Then there's me. Then there's half African, half Chinese, half Indian. So I'll say that we were always the rainbow because of the diversity that went to the islands. So when you get around someone that's diverse, there's a certain permeation that happens just because, their mindset is different to begin with. I've always thought of different as being normal.
Absolutely.
And I'm curious, when you've worked with C-suites where there's been a more homogeneity, where it's kind of like, okay, let's think about these concepts. Let's think about innovation. Let's think about diversity of thought. Let's think about how we can bring a different perspective. That's one thing. But when you already have the diversity in that room, how does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Roxanne, I love that you brought up that you grew up in a diverse society. Not everyone has that benefit. So a lot of times people are starting in different places, understanding how to just communicate and interact with people that are different than they are. Yeah. And so, starting there, what you'll want to do from an organization that's homogeneous versus one that has the benefit of being diverse. The one thing that I'd like to say is that diversity is broad. So when we think about diversity, very often we're thinking about race or gender or sexual orientation, but personality is an aspect of diversity. Disability is an aspect of diversity, and disability is a part of the diversity dimension that any of us can become a part of at any point in our lives through age, accident, diagnoses. And so for organizations, the employees and the prospective employees that are coming into those organizations want to feel comfortable that they will get that support and be allowed to thrive even as their life changes, right? Parental status is, an aspect of diversity. And you want an organization that can move with you as you go through your life. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much movement in your employee base and so much turnover, because they're looking for that home and that sense of belonging. But for organizations, Roxanne, that are diverse, studies show, and a lot of studies show in so many different aspects, that diversity of thought, that diversity of experience, that diversity of, how you solve problems benefits an organization from a revenue standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, from that sense of belonging standpoint. Because when you see diversity at the top, those middle managers, those individual contributors can see that there is a trajectory for them to succeed and grow within that organization, and they work harder and they look for those stretch assignments. Whereas when you see all of the same, those culturally diverse people that are in your middle rungs, it's frustrating for them because they're not sure how high they can move within that organization.
And I often say that sometimes my Caribbean upbringing gave me a different mindset because I thought anything was possible. So so of course I have, they think Middle Eastern, but mostly Indian background from India with indentured laborers, which, so the trajectory of what happened with slavery and indentured laborers, really, other than supposedly promise of land, really there was a lot, the conditions were harsh at best for my ancestors. But the thing is, what happened in order to survive, and this is the history with the Caribbean, and any Caribbean people listening, they're probably going to say I'm botching it up, but there was this element that you had, in order to survive, you had to embrace different. So there's that mindset that comes from the Caribbean, in that, you may be Hindu or Muslim or Black or Chinese or Middle Eastern, after a while, we in Trinidad, the term is Callaloo, in a way, which is a dish. It's a dish, but it's really a blending of everything. And that whole concept that, well, my brother could be Black or he could be white, even though there was the backdrop of colonialism. Right. And so when I came to Canada, when I was 16 to go to school, and then people would say, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, why? Why can't you do that? Why couldn't you, go on and do X, Y, or Z at university? Because, that doesn't happen. So it was a mindset that was a bit different, even though that we had the same backdrop. So again, culture, like to your point, acculturation, potentially what my exposure was, say, versus growing up in North America as well.
Absolutely, Roxanne. And the thing that is so pervasive and insidious are the narratives that not only are told about us, but are shared to us and are part of us, where we've got to really work to break through that in order to believe as in ourselves, to achieve as much as we can, because there's so much that's told to us that we're not good enough. We can't succeed. We can't do these things. And especially here in the United States, systems are set up that create disadvantage for us. And so the combination of all of those things, it's frustrating, and it's, it's a pervasive negativity that we really have to work to, one, overcome for ourselves, but two, overcome in society, because there are so many of us that are doing amazing things, have wonderful things to contribute. And because we, see ourselves in these boxes, right? It makes it difficult to branch out and be able to understand other perspectives, which is something that you had the benefit of growing up in a multicultural society. There were lots of perspectives, lots of ideas that were shared, and there's just a different level of comfort in growing up that way versus having to now understand that and embrace that. It's a little challenging and a little scary sometimes, to be honest, for organizational leaders that are doing it for the first time.
Absolutely. And having those conversations, I said, if you grow up and you're imbued in diversity, you think, well, why is this an issue? And my friends are from Trinidad, and we still get on the line and we're like, why it's so different, even though we know the systemic underpinnings, absolutely. Yes. And that existed in Trinidad as well. But I think because, my prime minister was Black, my dentist was Chinese, my physician was Indian. And so it didn't matter where you went, right? You were consistently around it. And then if you meet someone from my island, you'll know it's a Trini. Like, we joke around because we have the same way of thinking again. But it's all different cultures, right? And ethnicities. So it shows you, and when I speak about authenticity, I talk about just going from the heart, because ultimately, that's the space that we all want, that space within, whether we're out with our children or we're running a company or we're on teams. What is it? I just want to be uniquely who I am. And if you can't have a conversation about who I am, and you were to see me visibly, you're going to treat me differently, not knowing my background. So you take someone just like me that, say, was born in the US, our realities are going to be completely different in so many ways. So I think that's what I talk about is, getting comfortable enough to have the conversation to say, hey, Jackie, where are you from? Or tell me a bit about you. How did you grow up? Did you have a big family, a small family? Did you, what are the things that make you you? And I think, to your point, if you have people that are comfortable to get there, that's one thing. But if you're just kind of stepping into it and it's a recipe, that's a whole other thing. And there's a lot of tiptoeing around things that eventually, when people come from the heart, it's easier to get to.
I love that. And authenticity is such an important word in this work, Roxanne, because ultimately everything that you're doing is establishing a relationship of trust. And you have to be authentic in your relationships. When I ask you how you're doing, I really mean it. I want to know how you're doing. It's not something that I'm just checking off my list, right? And you have to also be vulnerable yourself. So if you're looking for information about me and want me to share with you, then you should share with me. And so that's something, that give and take is so important. And it's important for individuals who don't have that experience with multicultural societies to really, become comfortable with, so that they can have those open dialogues and learn some new things and see the world through other perspectives, because we all see through our own, lens of experience, right? And so to really be able to be a person who is empathetic, and that's part of the work in DEI, whether it's in, your communities or in your corporations. You've got to open and broaden your perspective a little bit, and you certainly can do that well through conversations. So again, authenticity is such an important word in this work.
And, and music, right? Like, I think about the things that cut through our souls, right? So obviously going back again to my history, there's Calypso, right? Well, Calypso and Carnival, which is, came out of basically slavery, right? So I played, I'm the typical Caribbean kid. I played the steel pan, right? So I grew up, and you guys call it a band, we call it a side. So I grew up playing the steel drums. I came to Canada. I toured Canada with my high school, went to the Parliament buildings when I was 13 years old. And we did a cultural exchange, was everything from African dance to combination of choirs. I played, Hava Nagila along with, the Canadian anthem on the steel pan.
Yeah.
Right. So, so when you kind of start to look at it from there, and I often say my lens is that, what an opportunity, because it's, when you meet somebody that is not like you, there's such wealth within them, but oftentimes that space of, I don't know what to ask, or I don't know how to be, if you can just be yourself and open up your heart, which is like what you said is the core fundamental of getting to trust, which is, I want to feel good on the inside, just like you.
Yes.
But that takes work and time, and metrics has to get out of the way. And tactics have to find its spot, and the bottom line and boards and all that stuff gets mixed up in there. But, I think cutting through it to get to who are you? And how is it that I can help you shine through, so you can just let me understand who you are, is what I see as being very, very important. And music is a good way to do that.
Absolutely. And, that's so great, Roxanne, because ultimately, in order to do this work, you've got to find the baseline that people can all agree on, right? And people love music. That's a great way to find that, where is the point of agreement? And for DEI, that point of agreement usually is, do you believe that people are entitled to be respected, feel safe, and feel that their contributions are valued at work? And usually you're going to get a yes there. So from there, that's where the work starts, no matter where people are on that spectrum of having experience with other cultures, other dimensions of diversity, what their education level is on that diversity journey. That is the fundamental baseline that people can agree on. And then the work begins from there.
So at the third stage of, like you said, the year 3, I would assume that foundation has been built. So I guess I'm going to assume policies are in alignment. You're going to have some basic communication capacity. You're going to start with your C-suite, like you said, and then obviously then you're going to go to middle management, and front line. But of course that takes a lot of time, because you got to kind of work out the kinks between every level. So let's say you're a senior leader or a CEO listening to this, and you're thinking, I think we do some of it. um,
Mhm.
we have touch points. What would your advice be to someone like that to say what I'm listening to Jackie and Roxanne, I'm realizing how many things we have attempted or some of it that we've done well, but boy, we've dropped the ball. And it's not because we're really not trying, but it's
Mhm.
because we're not aware of some of the things that we should be keeping our eye on. What would you say to someone like that?
Absolutely. So a couple of things there, Roxanne. One, you're going to be chasing progress over perfection. You're not going to get it all right. You're not going to hit the mark on every single initiative in your DEI journey that you want. And that's okay. The most important thing is to be authentic, as you said, be vulnerable and share communication throughout what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's been the progress, whether it's big progress, small progress, no progress.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you're going to change? What are some of the things that you're going to try? That communication is key throughout your entire DEI journey, because you've got to gain buy-in from C-suite to your middle managers, which are a very important part of the process because they ensure that DEI strategy is rolled out day to day and acted upon by your individual contributors. And so then measuring is so important, because again, even small movement can have exponential value to your organization, from what that means from a productivity standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, from a cohesiveness standpoint. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're measuring everything from your diversity data to your um, equity policies. For example, if you look at your HR policies, many of those policies have been pulled in from, other organizations or the organization you worked in before. It's been the same, time off policy for 20 years, right? But those policies need to be reviewed because, our families look different. Our lifestyles are different. The things that we're responsible for are different. And we want to make sure that those policies are reflective of, who we are as individuals and as families that are part of the organization. And then, the inclusion piece is so important in making sure that you are creating that culture where people feel valued and they feel safe, which is, you think that's fundamental, but a lot of employees, especially who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, don't feel safe in their places of work. And so those are some of the basics that you want to be. Communication, measurement, so important. And then once you get to that year 3, you'll be able to see real progress and then determine, okay, where do we want to dig in from here? These are things that are going right. These are things that we've not been super successful at yet. Let's, do some remix of what our plans and strategies are, and, dig into this new paradigm. But again, DEI is a journey. You're never going to get to the finish line. It's continual. It's a process. It has to do with people, and people are evolving, and our society is evolving. And so you've got to just maintain your commitment to that journey.
You know what just came to me, and I just think I'm listening to what about the stories in reference to the business units, and sharing that as let's say you're making progress, and from a marketing perspective, if you can do a pre and a post and a process, right, and show it in reference to outcome, I think how beautiful would that be if you kind of looked at it and you looked at how you shifted, the impact you had, how it touched all the different parts of the business unit and the business, and then ultimately what it did to your business out there in kind of the world. That would be a beautiful kind of thing in reference to marketing. Yeah.
Roxanne, that's absolutely right. And again, that story should be told. That communication should occur internally. It should occur externally, because if you're thinking about, your existing employees, They want to know, what are we doing? We've got these extra things that we've got to learn, and we've got to implement, and we've got to do. So what's the progress that we're making as a whole? And then also the external communication is equally important, from your brand reputation, from how you're recruiting the best and the brightest who are prioritizing DEI in the companies that they want to work for. And so that communication piece is so important. And share those stories, share your progress, share your wins, share the things that haven't gone well, that you're going to try a different way. That is all part of that authenticity, Roxanne, that you were talking
and transparency
about.
And transparency, right?
Absolutely.
Like you talked a little bit about narratives, and narratives are based on mindsets. And I think, the part that I think about is like, when, I shouldn't say if, and I believe that most companies want to do this, when you start to make that shift and you create that evolutionary story about what you created based on what you've been exposed to. Like I always go back, you can't go back to not knowing. And then you let people know as you go along, and then you ask for feedback, obviously, in whatever way that works for your organization, the breadth and depth that you can get to. And even for things that you think you're doing well, and then you realize, boy, that's not working so well, because people are going along and they're being complicit, but in fact, it's maybe helping 45% of the people, but not the other 65. To tweak those things become very, very important. And I think, the stories, the how you're seeing the brand, how people are perceiving you, how, across from the, lunch table now, if people are back together at work, they can be able to talk about it, versus thinking, oh, well, I can't ask Roxanne that because I'm not sure she's going to say that. And maybe I'm going to put her off, because if you're coming from a place of, I'm just a normal human being that really, really wants to know who you are, Jackie, that comes across from a different, deeper soul space as well.
Absolutely. And Roxanne, that made me think of growth mindset, right? We as leaders have to have a growth mindset in order to move our organizations into, this next 10 years. We have to create sustainable business. And part of creating sustainable business is understanding the shifts and the trends that are occurring in society, and, trends in how we work, trends in how we absorb data and information, trends in what we do in our downtime. Those things change over time, right? And one of the examples that I use so often is Blockbuster, right? And I'm a Gen Xer, and I remember spending my Friday nights at Blockbuster, getting my, 2 new releases and my Skittles, right? And now, the situation that occurred was that Netflix went to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster said, no, that's not going to change, right? And unfortunately, that's what happens with some leaders now around DEI. I don't know that I have to get into DEI, right? And so, but unfortunately for them, that is going to create issues with longevity of their business, because, again, with Gen Z coming into the workplace, where they want to work, the brands they want to patronize have to be really aligned with their values differently than any other generation before. And so to create sustainable business, you have to have that growth mindset, and DEI is part of that.
And I think, a lot of companies have been successful without the strategy in the past, for them to be aware that it's looking at, to your point, is if diversity and inclusion, we're knowing that, like you said, the demographic of the world is shifting. Yes. And I know definitely the US probably the same. So if that's the case, you can look at it and say, oh, well, we've been successful. Or you can say, okay, what is it that I need to be aware of? And if I'm not so good at collating the information, what pulses do I have to make sure we have out there, so that things are coming back to us that maybe we're not even thinking about. And I think sometimes the Gen Zs are the best for that, in
Mhm.
that they're like thinking in such a different way. And talking to younger generations, it's sometimes I think, wow, how do you think like that? Because
Mhm.
they have such
Absolutely.
a different perspective, right?
Right.
So I think it's you're right. Diversity of thought comes in packaged in so many different ways. So it's not just a racialized. That's obviously that's the biggest one that's imminent, but it's all around us. But ultimately, it's understanding that individual and what they're going to bring with them, regardless of what diversity, whether it's invisible or visible, that they're bringing out there to the workplace.
Absolutely, Roxanne. That's well said. Well said.
So I know you and I could probably keep chatting. Now, for people that are interested and are thinking, well, we're at different points, like Jackie's saying, that they're wanting to maybe reach out or consult, kind of know where they're at. Where's the best place, Jackie, for them to get a hold of you?
Certainly. So you can go to the diversitymovement.com and just reach out to us there. It'll give you lots of great information for free. You can go to our webinars. We do webinars every month. We provide lots of free content that will help you on your journey. And then you can certainly reach out to us and we can talk to you about what might be right for your organization. And again, every organization is different. There is not a cookie cutter approach. So we'd love an opportunity to just have a conversation with you, see what your goals are, and help you work towards them.
Well, thanks so much again. So what am I walking away with? I'm walking away with it's not perfections, it's progress.
Okay.
Look at where you're at. Tell the stories like we talked a little bit about. And, as the leader or part of the C-suite, think, what is it that I can bring forward that might help others, even though I'm thinking I may not be diverse. It may be something that you've experienced when you're out there in the world and you think, wow, this is something I'd never thought about. Bring it back, have that open conversation. And I think we all have to be open to the fact that we're going to learn till the day we die. So just be recognizing that wherever you go, if it's an experience in the world or, seeing someone interact differently, bring it back, have conversations about it. And because ultimately, like we said, all we want to do as human beings is to have that experience of being accepted out there. We want to be valued. We want our lights to shine. Yes. And allow that space within your companies, and reach out to Jackie if that's something that you're wanting. With myself, I talk about authenticity. I talk about my book, The ROR, which is the Return on Relationships, is about to be released. So if you're wanting to know about authenticity in your relationships, just go to roxannedurhage.com/quiz with one Z, and it'll pop you right into a little assessment. We'll send you some information. Again, Jackie, thanks so much, and take care, everyone. We'll chat with you soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhage.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.